It was the middle of winter last year when I made the decision that would change everything. A solo journey, a road trip through the icy expanse of Wisconsin all the way to the remote corners of Montana. I had always prided myself on being independent, on having a love for adventure that could overcome any challenge. The idea of driving alone across hundreds of miles, through desolate stretches of land, seemed exhilarating. After all, how hard could it be? The road beckoned to me, silent and mysterious. I planned to leave at 7 p.m., under the cover of night, so that I could make the most of the quiet roads. By the time the sun would rise, I would be well on my way. The world would be asleep, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the endless expanse of the road. I packed my car carefully, stuffing it with snacks, water, a few blankets, and a half-empty gas tank. The route was mapped out, with occasional stops planned for fuel. I had a fully charged phone, a portable charger, and a backup plan in case things went wrong. The journey was supposed to be peaceful, an escape from the chaos of daily life. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me, something I couldn't yet understand. The moment I set off, the sound of the tires on the frozen asphalt was the only noise I could hear. The headlights cut through the darkness ahead, illuminating the narrow, lonely road. I had driven this path before, but never at night, never with the oppressive quiet that seemed to surround me now. The trees on either side of the road stood like silent sentinels, their bare branches twisting and reaching out like skeletal hands. The farther I drove, the more isolated I felt. There were no streetlights, no signs of life, just the occasional snowflake fluttering against the windshield. The world outside seemed vast, infinite, and it felt like the car was the only thing that existed in this frozen wasteland. Then, an odd sensation settled in. It was subtle at first, just a slight shift in the air. A coldness that seemed to seep into my bones. I couldn't explain it, but the feeling of being watched was palpable. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw nothing but empty road. But something felt wrong, something out of place. By the time I reached a small town, I stopped to refuel. The gas station was dimly lit, the flickering neon sign casting an eerie glow over the snow-covered ground. I got out of the car, stretching my legs, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. There were no other cars in sight. The place seemed deserted. As I walked up to the pump, a man emerged from the small convenience store. He was tall, with a hood pulled low over his face. He nodded at me, his eyes not meeting mine, but he seemed to know exactly who I was. "Long drive ahead?" he asked in a voice that was too soft, too careful. "Yeah," I replied, trying to shake off the sudden chill. "I'm heading to Montana." He nodded again, this time a bit too slowly. "You're brave to be out here alone, especially at night," he said. I shrugged, trying to brush it off. "I'm used to it." He didn't respond, just stared at me for a moment before turning and disappearing back into the store. His presence lingered, though, heavy in the air. I finished filling up my tank quickly, wanting to leave the strange encounter behind me. But as I drove away, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. The hours passed, and the road stretched on, seemingly endless. The small towns grew fewer and farther between. The snow began to fall harder, swirling in thick white sheets around me. I switched on the radio to break the silence, but all I could hear was static. The signal was weak, fading in and out like a whisper on the wind. Around midnight, I passed through a stretch of road that was particularly desolate. The wind howled, shaking the car, and the snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, reducing visibility. It was as if the world had shrunk to nothing but the road, the car, and the howling wind. And that's when I saw it. A figure, standing on the side of the road, barely visible in the dark. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a trick my tired eyes were playing on me. But as I got closer, I could see that it was a person. A woman, wrapped in a tattered coat, her face obscured by a hood. She was standing perfectly still, not moving, as if waiting for something or someone. I slowed down as I approached, instinctively. The car's headlights illuminated her form, but she didn't flinch. She didn't even seem to notice the car. I drove past her, my heart racing. But as I glanced into the rearview mirror, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She was walking towards the car, slowly, deliberately. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Something about her presence terrified me. I stepped on the gas, urging the car to go faster, the engine roaring against the silence of the night. The figure faded from view, but the unsettling feeling lingered. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, but it felt as though the darkness was closing in around me. The wind howled louder, the snow thickened, and the road stretched on like an endless void. And then, just as I thought I might escape it all, my headlights flickered. The car stuttered and jerked as though the engine was losing power. I cursed under my breath and slammed the gas pedal harder. But it didn't help. The engine sputtered, then died completely. I was stranded. The eerie quiet that followed was almost worse than the blizzard. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. Of course. The one time I really needed it, there was no connection. I sat in the dark for a moment, my breath shallow and rapid. The wind howled outside, pressing against the car like an invisible force. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan, trying to think logically. But all I could feel was the overwhelming sense of dread, the feeling that something was watching me. I had to get out. I had to move. I took a deep breath and forced myself out of the car, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the door handle. The wind immediately whipped at me, biting into my skin as I stepped out into the snowstorm. The freezing air felt like needles against my face, and I could barely see more than a few feet ahead of me. I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding. There was no sign of anyone around, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was out there. The snowstorm was getting worse by the minute, and I knew I had to act fast. I walked around the car, trying to find some sign of what had happened to the engine. I opened the hood, but the engine was icy cold, the only sound being the howl of the wind. There was no visible damage. It was as if something had simply cut the power off, like a deliberate act. As I stood there, confused and desperate, I heard it. A soft crunching sound in the snow behind me. I whipped around, my heart skipping a beat. The figure, the woman I had seen earlier, was standing in the distance. But this time, she wasn't standing still. She was walking toward me, her movement slow, deliberate, as though she had all the time in the world. My chest tightened. I wanted to shout at her, to ask if she could help me, but something in my gut told me that was the last thing I should do. There was something wrong about her. Her presence was unnatural, like she didn't belong in this world. I stumbled backward, bumping into the car. My breath came out in visible puffs, my vision fogging up from the cold. But I couldn't look away from her. I couldn't turn around and run. Something inside me was paralyzed, frozen by a fear I couldn't explain. She kept coming, her steps unhurried, but steady, like a predator closing in on its prey. The snow swirled around us, making the night even darker, and the wind roared louder, drowning out every other sound. It felt like the world was collapsing in on itself. My instincts screamed at me to get back in the car and lock the doors. I couldn't let her get any closer. But before I could move, I heard another noise, a loud crack like something breaking in the woods nearby. I turned just in time to see a pair of glowing eyes watching me from the edge of the trees. They were not animal eyes. No. These eyes were too intelligent, too predatory. And they weren't alone. In that instant, I understood, the woman wasn't the only thing out here. I stumbled backward, panic flooding my mind as I looked around. The eyes, they were everywhere now. Dozens of pairs, glowing faintly through the snow and darkness, watching, waiting. I ran for the car, my legs heavy with the weight of fear. My heart thundered in my chest, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to survive. I reached the door, yanked it open, and leaped inside, slamming it shut behind me. I locked the doors, my fingers fumbling with the keys as I tried to restart the engine. It sputtered once, twice, then finally roared to life. I exhaled in relief. But that relief was short-lived. The headlights flickered again, and in the split second of darkness, I saw it. The woman was right outside the car, her face now visible in the faint light. Her eyes were hollow, black pits that seemed to absorb everything around them, and her mouth stretched into a grotesque, unnatural smile. I slammed the car into drive and floored the accelerator, but the road was slick with snow, and the car skidded as I tried to maintain control. The headlights illuminated the path ahead, but the shadows around me seemed to grow darker, thicker, as though the night itself was swallowing the road whole. Suddenly, a figure darted across the road, appearing out of nowhere. I swerved violently to the right, my hands gripping the wheel in a white-knuckled panic. The car skidded, spinning, but I fought to control it, heart racing as I tried to avoid crashing into the trees lining the road. The car lurched back onto the path, and I pushed harder on the gas, determined to get away from whatever was chasing me. I didn't dare look back, but I knew. I could feel their presence. The eyes. Watching. Always watching. For what felt like hours, I drove through the snowstorm, my mind reeling. I kept my foot on the gas, refusing to stop, refusing to let myself be caught. But as the road twisted ahead, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A figure in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes, but it was too late. The car slid, and I felt the tires lose grip. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. I was going to hit it. I closed my eyes, bracing for impact. But there was no crash. The car stopped inches from the figure, the wheels spinning in the snow, and the world was suddenly silent. I opened my eyes slowly. The figure was still there, standing perfectly still, its back to me. It was a man this time, wearing a hood and tattered clothes, just like the woman. The same eerie stillness. He turned around slowly, and when he looked at me, I felt my blood freeze in my veins. His face was pale, almost ghostly, and his eyes, those eyes were black, like empty voids that seemed to pull me in. "Why are you here?" he whispered, his voice chilling and hollow, like a voice from the grave. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. "You're too late," he continued, his voice growing louder. "The road calls to you. It always calls to those who are lost." I couldn't understand what he meant. My mind raced. I needed to escape. I needed to get away. But as I stepped on the gas again, the car didn't move. It was as if the engine had frozen. No matter how much I pushed the pedal, the car stayed stuck. I looked back at the man. His expression hadn't changed. His eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. And then, just as the snow around me grew colder and the wind howled like a furious beast, I realized something. Something that shook me to my core. I wasn't alone anymore. I felt the cold seep deeper into my bones as I stared at the man, my breath quick and shallow, heart racing. The car was still frozen, its engine lifeless, no matter how many times I slammed my foot on the gas. I was trapped. The man didn't move. His eyes, the void-like blackness in them, were still locked onto me, like he was searching for something inside my very soul. The wind howled louder, whipping snow around the car in frenzied circles, but the figure remained still, as if impervious to the storm. My pulse was thunderous in my ears. I had to move. I had to get away from this madness. But I couldn't. "Do you understand now?" the man whispered again, his voice slithering through the cold like a serpent. "The road, it calls. The road always calls." I shook my head, unable to make sense of his words. What was he talking about? What road? What did he mean, always calls? I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me. What the hell is happening? I pushed harder, slamming my shoulder into the door, but it remained shut. My mind raced, looking for a way out, a way to escape this nightmare. And then I heard it, the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching through the snow behind me. I froze, dread crawling up my spine like 1,000 icy fingers. I didn't need to turn around to know who or what it was. I could feel its presence. Another figure, this one tall and unnaturally thin, moved into the edge of my vision. It was a woman. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, her hair long and black, hanging like a veil around her face. She didn't move like a normal person. She glided across the snow, her feet not even touching the ground. My eyes widened in terror. The woman from before. She stepped closer, her smile widening impossibly, stretching like it could never stop. Her lips cracked with a sound like breaking ice, and the cold air around her seemed to shimmer, bending with an unnatural heat that burned my skin. "No need to run," the man's voice echoed in my ears, low and mocking. "You can't escape. None of us can escape." I twisted in my seat, my fingers slipping on the steering wheel as I searched for any possible escape route. But everything around me was frozen. The road, the trees, the very air, it all felt like it was closing in, trapping me in a nightmare of its own making. I jerked the wheel to the right, instinctively trying to veer the car away from the figures. But the tires spun uselessly in the snow, and the car didn't budge. I was stuck in a prison of ice, surrounded by them. Then, the woman raised her hand. Slowly, deliberately. The air seemed to grow colder still, and the snow began to swirl violently around us, the wind becoming a living thing, ripping and tearing through the storm. I screamed, slamming my hands against the dashboard, trying to force the car forward. But it was useless. Her presence, the force she exuded, was too powerful. The temperature in the car dropped drastically, frost spreading across the windows, encasing us in an unholy chill. With a sudden movement, the woman's hand shot forward, and I felt something pull me, as if invisible tendrils were wrapping around my body, dragging me toward the windshield. I screamed again, kicking and clawing at the air, but it was as if the very fabric of the world around me had turned to ice. I could no longer move. The man stepped closer, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "You will understand soon," he said. "All those who come here, they are chosen. You were chosen." My heart raced. Chosen? What the hell did that mean? I tried to speak, but the words were caught in my throat. The cold was suffocating. My vision blurred, everything spinning around me in a swirl of icy madness. The woman's face was right in front of me now, her hollow eyes staring into mine with a terrifying emptiness. Her smile stretched impossibly wide, and I felt my chest tighten, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This is it, I thought. I'm going to die here. Suddenly, there was a violent crash. The sound of something shattering. The car door next to me flew open, slamming against the side with such force that it left a dent in the metal. For a moment, everything went still. The wind stopped howling. The snowflakes hung suspended in the air like frozen fragments of time. I dared not move. I could barely breathe. A new figure stepped into the car, his silhouette casting a long shadow in the dim light. He was tall, but different from the others. His face was obscured by a hood, but his posture was confident, almost too confident. "Enough," he said, his voice smooth, yet commanding. The woman and the man didn't move. They froze, as if they were waiting for something, waiting for him. The stranger stepped forward, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. He didn't seem affected by the cold. In fact, the frost around the car began to melt as he approached, like the warmth of his presence was pushing back the unnatural chill. "Get out," he said, holding out a gloved hand. I hesitated for a moment, still unsure of who or what he was. But something about him, something in his voice, urged me to trust him. I grabbed his hand, and as soon as I did, the world around me seemed to shudder. The car jerked, the engine roaring back to life as if by magic. The ice on the windows cracked, the warmth returning to the air. The figures, the woman, the man, remained motionless, as if they were statues, frozen in place by the stranger's presence. I was pulled out of the car, stumbling onto the snow-covered ground. The stranger's hand remained firm on my arm, guiding me away from the vehicle, away from the horror. He didn't look back. I did. The road stretched out behind us, twisting into the distance, but there was no sign of the figures anymore. No sign of the woman, no sign of the man. I turned back to the stranger. What's happening? Who are they? What are they? The stranger looked at me, his face hidden by the hood, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They are the road, he said quietly. And now, they're coming for you. The cold was still clinging to my skin as I stumbled through the snow, the stranger's grip tight on my arm, pulling me away from the car. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't really escaping. We were only moving from one nightmare to another. The road is calling. The words echoed in my mind, chilling me to my core. But there was no time to dwell on them, no time to process. The stranger didn't slow his pace, his steps long and purposeful as he led me deeper into the snowstorm, away from the car, away from the figures. What's happening? I asked again, my voice desperate, trying to make sense of everything. Who are they? What do they want with me? He didn't answer right away, his gaze fixed ahead, as if he could see something I couldn't. A dark shadow in the distance, creeping toward us. A chill ran down my spine. Everything you've seen tonight, he said, his voice low and steady, it's part of a much older story. A story that's been written in the roads, in the lands where no one dares to go. It's a story of travelers, of souls lost in time. And you've become part of it? I tried to pull away from his grip, but his hand only tightened. What do you mean? Why me? What do they want? He finally turned to face me, his eyes glowing faintly, as if they contained some ancient knowledge. You've been chosen. The road calls to those who wander, those who stray too far from the path. And once you hear it, once it finds you, you can never escape. I froze. My mind raced. Chosen. For what? To be trapped here forever, lost in this storm of nightmares? What did I do to deserve this? But before I could speak, the ground beneath us began to tremble. At first, it was subtle, a vibration in the snow, a slight shift in the air. Then, the tremors grew stronger. The wind howled louder, and the shadows on the road seemed to stretch, growing longer, twisting into shapes that shouldn't be possible. I looked around in panic, but all I could see was an endless expanse of snow and darkness, as though the world itself was closing in on us. The stranger's face grew tense, his eyes scanning the horizon. We have to move. Now. He grabbed my arm again, pulling me forward with a new urgency, but I resisted, pulling away from him. No. I don't understand. Why are they chasing me? Why are they after me? The stranger's expression darkened. Because you are part of their plan, he said. And it's too late to turn back now. The road is alive. It feeds on the lost. The souls of those who wander, of those who hear its call, are bound to it forever. And the road wants you. It's been waiting for you. Before I could respond, a scream ripped through the night air. A high-pitched, wailing sound that pierced the stillness like a blade through flesh. I turned, eyes wide with terror, and saw it. The woman. The one with the cracked smile, her face twisted in agony, her limbs jerking unnaturally as she moved toward us. Behind her, the man followed, his black eyes gleaming, his step slow but deliberate. I took a step back, heart pounding in my chest. The stranger's grip tightened, pulling me toward him. But it was too late. They were already upon us. The woman raised her hand, and the air around us grew thick, heavy with the weight of her presence. The snow seemed to freeze in mid-air, suspended by some unseen force. The shadows around us shifted, closing in, swirling around us in a suffocating fog. The man's voice cut through the cold, low, and threatening, "You cannot run from the road. It always claims those who wander." I looked back at the stranger, panic in my eyes. What do we do? How do we stop them? He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked from the figures to the road ahead, his mind racing. There is only one way. What way? I demanded. Tell me. But before he could respond, the road itself seemed to shift. The snow under our feet cracked, splitting apart like the earth itself was breaking open. From the fissure in the ground, a new figure emerged, one that seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. It was a man, but his face was obscured by a mask of swirling shadows. He was tall, impossibly tall, and his presence felt wrong in every sense. The woman and the man, the ones who had been chasing us, stopped, their faces twisted in a mix of fear and reverence. The masked figure spoke, his voice echoing in the howling wind. It is time for the final reckoning. The road has spoken. The stranger beside me stepped forward, his eyes now hard, his hands still gripping mine with an iron-like strength. Then it's time for you to answer, he said, his voice now cold and determined. The tension in the air was palpable, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The woman and the man backed away slowly, their eyes fixed on the masked figure with a mix of fear and awe. But the figure didn't move. Instead, he raised his hand, and the ground beneath us began to shake violently, the world around us shuddering as if some great force were about to tear it apart. The stranger turned to me, his face grave. Whatever happens next, you must be ready. The road will never let you go. But you can fight. You can choose. Before I could respond, the earth split open completely, and the figures vanished into the chasm below, swallowed by the darkness. The masked figure looked at us, his eyes hidden behind the shadows of his mask. The road has claimed its due. But will you accept your fate? He asked. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. The storm grew louder, the wind howling as the ground continued to tremble beneath us. Everything around me felt as if it were teetering on the edge of destruction. And then, the world went dark. The storm roared louder, drowning out everything else. The world around us seemed to break apart at the seams, the ground trembling, the wind howling, the very air thick with a palpable tension. The masked figure stood motionless, his presence dark and imposing. The stranger beside me took a slow step forward, his expression unreadable. And then, without warning, the road began to split open beneath us. The snow cracked, giving way to a yawning chasm that stretched deep into the earth, dark and bottomless. From the depths of the chasm, an unearthly light flickered, casting eerie shadows against the snow-covered ground. The figures, the woman with the cracked smile, the man with the black eyes, vanished, swallowed by the darkness below. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Fear surged through me like a wave. What was happening? Why was the road doing this? What did it mean for me? The stranger's grip tightened on my arm, pulling me back. "It's not over," he whispered, his voice strained. "You can't run from it. The road calls, and once it does, you're part of it." The air grew heavier, suffocating, as if the world was being drawn into the void. The masked figure raised a hand, and the very ground beneath our feet seemed to shift and groan, as though some ancient force was awakening. But then, in a sudden flash, everything went quiet. The storm ceased. The ground stilled. A cold silence blanketed us, broken only by the echo of the masked figure's words. "The road has claimed its due. But you still have a choice. To accept the call, or to resist." Before I could respond, the figure's shadow melted into the darkness. And just as quickly, the snowstorm returned, fierce and wild, obscuring everything. The figures, the chasm, the stranger, they were gone. I stood there alone, the sound of the storm deafening in my ears, the weight of the masked figure's words pressing heavily on my mind. The road, the storm, the shadowy figures, they were all connected in some way. But how? What was their true purpose? And most importantly, what was my role in all of this? I looked around, but there was nothing. Just the endless white of the snowstorm and the cold, dark sky above. And in the distance, something shifted. A shape, faint at first, like a mirage, then clearer with every passing second, emerged from the storm. It moved toward me, slow but steady, like a presence that had always been there, waiting. A part of something much larger, much older. The road was calling again. And this time, it was different.